I do think he's an upgrade this year.
Yes.
They have a great defense. Now, they're still Washington, so...
Hey, there's your Bengals right there.
I'm not ready
No
to go
segment, Ryan. We figured it out.
Mind blown. Could it be? Could the Washington Commanders be the Cincinnati Bengals of the 2022-2023 season? Could they go from being bums of their conference and division and rise to being one of the best teams in their conference, let alone the NFL? Welcome to Beyond the Box Score, where we talk about things that go on and beyond the box score. And I'm your host, RJ, the DMV MVP. And today, we're going to talk about how Colin, Cowherd, and Joy Taylor, in a roundabout way, kind of figured out that the Washington Commanders could be the Bengals of the 2022-2023 season. They could, come from being that bottom feeder in their division to being one of the best teams in the league. So they started off their conversation talking about Carson Wentz and started comparing him to Matt Ryan because, again, he's being replaced by Matt Ryan in Indianapolis, and this is just another example of him being replaced the way he got replaced by Nick Foles. And then they started examining Matt Ryan's situation, and they started thinking maybe the Colts are the Bengals of the 2022-2023 season. So let's take a listen to what they said.
If Carson Wentz struggles, we're all going to go, dude, Nick Foles, when you left Philly, look what he did. Matt Ryan. So I think Wentz is arguably facing the most pressure of any quarterback in the league this year.
Someone asked me yesterday who I think could possibly be the Bengals of this year.
Oh, that's a good question. Who asked you that? That's a good question.
I don't know that you can consider them the Bengals because the Colts are a really well-run organization. But they're always just right there. Matt Ryan has a little bit to prove this year.
He's more than competent.
Might have a little bit of chip on his shoulder.
I wish they were better at wide receiver. I wish they had more weapons.
They do feel like they could use a little more spice.
A little more juice offensively.
But they're a team that I think everyone should be careful
That's a good topic for tomorrow. Ryan, step away from the hockey scores. That's a big topic tomorrow. Let's start working on it. Who are the Bengals of next year? That's a great topic.
So you heard it there, right? Joy Taylor throws out that the Colts could be the Bengals of the 2022-2023 season. But when you really look and compare the Colts, the Bengals, and the Commanders, there's only one key similarity in the scenario, and that's that they all have a quarterback that had a chip on his shoulder, right? Burrow had a chip on his shoulder coming off injury. Matt Ryan has a chip on his shoulder being traded from the Falcons to the Colts. And then we all know the trials and tribulations of Carson Wentz. But there's a lot of places where they differ and where the Commanders and the Bengals are similar, starting with the fact that the Bengals are a poorly run franchise historically, and so are the Washington Commanders. Going into the 2021 season, nobody had the Bengals picked as the top team in the AFC, and it's the same deal here with the Washington Commanders. Nobody really has them as the top team in the NFC. A couple people have them on the radar as being an improving team, obviously because they got a nice improvement in the quarterback position. But even with some improvement at the quarterback position and what many think could be a solid defense, I don't know about if they're a great defense, but they should be solid. Joy and Colin eventually came to the conclusion that the Washington Commanders were the Bengals of the 2022-2023 season.
Now, I do think he is an upgrade to what they had at quarterback last year.
Joy, he had 27 touchdowns and 7 picks for Indy. Like, he can play. He's too reckless. But the idea that he stinks.
3,500 yards, 62.4 completion percentage, went 9-8. How he ended the season is what we're remembering. I do think he's an upgrade this year.
Yes.
They have a great defense. Now, they're still Washington, so...
Hey, there's your Bengals right there.
I'm not ready to go
segment, Ryan. We figured it out.
So there you heard it. In a roundabout way, kind of in jest, Colin and Joy came to the agreement that the Commanders are actually the Bengals of the 2022-2023 season. And I wanted to touch on some of the things that they hit on that made them come to that conclusion and a few additional things as well. Now, the first thing is we're better at quarterback, right? The Washington Commanders brought in Carson Wentz. You're talking about the past few years. We had a hobbled Alex Smith, a Kyle Allen, Ryan Fitzpatrick momentarily, Taylor Heineke, and even I think Josh Johnson even at one point, right? Now we have Carson Wentz, a guy that when you look at quarterback ratings in the NFL, he was in the top 15. You know, love him or hate him, he's a serviceable quarterback who can put up numbers. And even though he gets chewed out for being reckless at times, 7 interceptions last year doesn't make you look like a reckless quarterback. It's in the key moments where he may come across as reckless. Now, sometimes a quarterback can come across as reckless because they're trying too hard to make things happen. And sometimes a quarterback has to try too hard to make things happen because they may not have the weapons, right? So they're holding on to the ball, they're throwing it up, they're waiting for that last second opportunity. In this situation, Carson Wentz is getting an upgrade, and he's getting an arsenal of weapons similar to the arsenal of weapons Burrow has. Now, by no means am I saying that the Commanders have a Jamar Chase on their team, but Joe Burrow had some playmaking receivers, he had some receivers with size, and he had some running backs that could also catch the ball out of the backfield. When you look at the Commanders, you got Terry McLaurin, you got Curtis Samuels, who can definitely make some plays after the catch if he's in good form. And then you have this X factor, this unknown in Jahan Dotson, who everyone's really excited about. He's like this combination of Keenan Allen and Deshaun Jackson in my eyes in terms of his savvy route running and breakout speed. And then you also have receivers with size, right? Mainly at that tight end position where you have Logan Thomas. Yes, he is coming off injury, but when he was healthy, he was doing very well. But I'm most excited about the new tight ends. John Bates, who's in his second year, kind of in that, you know, discount Gronk mode. Obviously, he's not Gronk, but he wants to be in that build. That's why he has the same number as Gronk, and he can play in that form. He's a solid blocker and a pretty good route runner and receiver. And then Cole Turner, the other new exciting piece on the Commanders offense, tight end from Nevada, 6'6", 6'7". If you look at his highlight reel, he's a solid route runner. He's not the greatest route runner, but he runs his routes hard, finds those gaps in the zones, high points balls really well. And even though he high points balls really well and he's a big guy, he's also really good at diving for those low throws. So you can really throw him open, which means high or low, he creates a very, very big catch radius with his size and athleticism, which is, I mean, when you're talking about those fade routes in the end zone, and a guy like Carson Wentz who loves to throw to tight ends, right? Let's not forget, I mean, over the time, his best success has been with tight ends or big receivers like Jordan Matthews or Michael Pittman. So when you add that up along with the solid defense, right? It's not the greatest defense, but you have some playmakers on the front line with Montez Sweat and Chase Young, some improvements in the linebacker positions and in the secondary. You could make a case that they should be able to hold up pretty well against some of the better offenses in the NFL, especially considering their run defense, which was ranked top 10 in yards allowed and yards per carry. Now, when you add that up with the state of the NFC East, the Giants had a nice draft, the Eagles had a nice offseason, the Cowboys have a lot of questions about their offseason and whether they improved. I don't think they improved because, you know, Dak wasn't doing that well before he had Cooper. Now Cooper's gone, and I'm not sure they've really drafted to replace Cooper or have weapons on their team at any position that can replace the impact of Amari Cooper. So that being said, when you step back, literally every team has a question at quarterback, right? So a couple weeks into the season, given performance, given injury, things can really flip, right? Even before the season starts, in preseason, things can really start to flip. So as long as the Commanders play their cards right, don't lose those winnable games. And more importantly, a guy like Carson Wentz, who 27-7, those are solid numbers, but people still drag him for those bad plays that he made. Ultimately in the NFL, you have those quarterbacks that can be like Tom Brady or like a Matt Jones, just very surgical and methodical. And then you have those quarterbacks who have those weapons, and now they're a little more reckless, right? But you have to be fortunately reckless. You know, you got a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he used to just throw that thing up. Now, a couple years into his career, that recklessness was starting to bite him. It's the same thing with Carson Wentz. He can be reckless, he can be aggressive, but You need a little bit of luck, a little bit of good fortune, and you just got to be a little bit smarter about when you're being a little bit aggressive and more reckless than you normally would. Not to mention, he's in a position now where he has the weapons that I listed earlier. And when you have a receiving core with more speed, more size, and those pass-catching running backs who, for a reckless guy, can kind of rein him in a little bit, because now he has those running backs and Antonio Gibson, McKissick, who can just dump the ball off into the flats and they can make plays, run after the catch. You lower the chances of those reckless plays coming back to bite you, let alone happening at all. So that's my case right now for the Commanders being the Bengals of the 2022-2023 season. Being a Commanders fan, you don't got to twist my arm too hard for me to agree with Joy and Colin on that. Like, subscribe, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. Keep following and keep listening to Beyond the Box Score. Thanks for tuning in. Yep.